Nice morning. He doesn't think so. He's not the only one.
Yes, I think that'll be all right.
Trouble, trouble, trouble.
Good morning.
Dr. Glenn?
Just a moment, please. Dr. Glenn.
Some problems people can't always figure out for themselves. So they take them to the clinic if they have one, and the clinic can sometimes help. That's better than worrying yourself sick.
Thank you. Last room, please.
Okay.
Would you find out if the doctor...
All right, Jane. Begin now.
Special tools and special training help people over rough spots that could become much more serious.
The psychiatrist, Dr. Glenn, Jim.
Your brother's come to be with you, Anne, while we talk about how we can help you.
This time a year ago, Anne was a perfectly normal, healthy girl.
Hi, Anne!
I've lived beside the Morton kids all their lives. She's 23, he's 18. I suppose I know them about as well as you can know anybody. At least I thought so then. Their dad's a chartered accountant, and he works hard at it. He's not what I'd call easy with the children. He's something of a disciplinarian. Their mothers had most to do with their bringing up. Oh, yes, there are neighbors on the other side, Mrs. Palmer and Mrs. Plummer, lifelong friends. Mrs. Morton tended to be a bit fussy with her grown-up daughter sometimes.
Ready, Anne? Let's go.
But then most parents don't altogether like to see their children grow up and realize they'll be having to live their own lives.
Anne.
Anne had worked for Bill Thompson since she'd left high school, did secretarial work and managed the office. She'd been a good worker. But there came a time when Bill began to notice something was wrong. Something was bothering her, and it was interfering with her work.
I think you might as well go home.
Mrs. Morton had never had much reason to worry about Anne. She'd been an ideal child, I suppose you could say. Quiet, clever, and obedient.
Anne.
It's all right, Mother.
Mealtime at the Mortons, everyone sat down together, on time, unless someone was sick. Not to come to the table, as Anne came to do once in a while, upset things, particularly when her father was working hard, going back nights as he does so much. It wasn't part of their pattern of living, and it disturbed them.
I'm tired of all this. It's happening too often.
More patience with her.
Tell her I want to see her when I come home tonight.
Feeling all right, dear?
Yes, I'm fine.
You must have something to eat. Your father was most upset when you didn't come down for dinner.
Well, I wasn't hungry, Mother.
Will you have some of this?
No, thank you.
Will you have some fruit?
No, thank you. Just
Well,
coffee.
there's the phone. I'll get it. Hello?
Hi, sis.
Hello?
Yes, she's here. Just a moment. It's for you, Anne.
No.
Anne!
Hello, dear. How are you, Anne?
Hello, dear. Mrs. Gordon, this is Anne.
It's hard to explain away something that seems like deliberate rudeness.
Oh, you can't catch. Better than you can. Well, let's see you catch this one then. Yeah, well, at least I can throw straight. Put it right in here. Okay, here's one. Oh, that one was good. Here it comes. Oh, way off. Hey, Ann, throw us the ball. Ann!
There's nothing quite so disturbing as something you can't understand going on in someone who's close to you. It makes you angry and it hurts. And in the hurt you feel, you forget that the trouble isn't in you, but in the person who inspired the hurt. Anne had begun to be suspicious of food that anyone might have touched.
Hi, Herb. Hello, John. How are you?
It was Anne's boss who put the idea into our heads that maybe the girl was sick. He was enough on the sidelines not just to be hurt and blinded by Anne's seeming neglect and lack of consideration. Certainly, in some way, the girl was in trouble. By that time, we all knew something was wrong. And whatever it was definitely not getting better. I'd given her her regular checkup, and she'd appeared perfectly well. But I'd try to talk to her. Anne? Jim?
Anne, come on. Open up.
That room seemed both like an escape and a prison for her. And whatever it was that kept her there, or that she kept away from by being there, she wouldn't say if she knew herself. During the next weeks and months, we tried everything we thought might do any good. But there was no way we could get at this girl or the trouble locked up inside her. She didn't seem to trust us, people she'd known all her life. We wanted to help, but we failed, all of us. We couldn't understand. This last Wednesday, Jim had come over to my place for the evening, and Mr. Morton was going back to work. Mrs. Morton saw him off as she usually did. They were standing on the porch when Anne's friends came to get her for a dance they'd planned on for some time.
Evening, Mrs. Martin. Evening, sir.
Evening.
David.
Is Anne ready?
I'll get her.
Well, I must get back to the office.
Anne. David's here, Anne. Anne.
She's not here. She must have forgotten. Anne must have forgotten.
A lame excuse, but not the first time one had been necessary. This sort of thing had happened to all of us in one way or another, but that didn't help us to like it or understand it. We certainly were all mixed up.
Anne! What on earth are you doing there? You frightened me.
Mrs. Morton lost her temper, and probably for the first time to her mother since she was a child, so did Anne. And then, like a child, ran away.
Anne?
She ran to me and to Jim, but we didn't know it, and she couldn't let herself make us know it. She'd lived next door to my backyard and the goldfish pond there since she was a child. And it was like a child that she came back to it on that cold night where she could find no warmth.
You are the mother, Anne.
It had been a hard day and a long one for Mr. Morton, and he came home to find his wife with a sick headache from a daughter not accounted for, who had lost her temper and had been more than rude to her own mother. This was the last straw. He'd do the waiting up, and he'd tell her what was what, for once and for all.
Let go.
You've lost it.
You are trying to shut me out. I am still with you. I will stay with you. See yourself, Anne. See yourself. Is it you in the glass? The glass?
And after months of not quite being herself, and months of effort by those who loved her, doing for her what they could, all they knew to do, she was now definitely broken away from them and from everything about her, and so ill with an illness difficult to understand, shrouded in superstition, ignorance, and fear.
You're going to hospital for a while, Anne.
A mental hospital, where, because we do not let ourselves think of it, we think to find no return.
It's locked, you see. You'll never get out. You were afraid it would come to this.
Everything will be all right. You'll feel better soon.
It doesn't help to be stubborn, dear. And don't just sit. Go out for a walk. And do your hair.
There, that'll fix you.
Come on, up you get. Something troubling you? Come and sit over here, and let's see what we can do about it.
They'll tell you all sorts of things, but you can't believe them. They'll try to tell you this is a hospital. Don't listen to them.
Goodbye, Doctor. Goodbye. Goodbye.
She's no patient. She didn't get well here. They get actors to do that. You listen to me, not them.
It's a week now since Anne went away. The town is much the same. Anne's mother tells her friends Anne's in California for a rest. Sounds better than mental hospital. It's hard on her father, too.
Hi, Doc.
He doesn't talk about it. Tries not to think about it. The problems you run into in a town makes you think. When people are troubled, they feed on themselves. Not a very healthy diet. Jim, now, he's all right. He knows it's an illness Anne has, and he knows she can get better. Just as his boss got better from that arm he broke, and I fixed for him. Nice job, that, if I do say so. Coming along fine. Jim is a thoughtful boy. He's concerned about Anne, of course, but he's also concerned about the bigger problems. Why is it we seem to be afraid to think about mental illness when it takes up nearly half of all hospital beds? Why don't we hear more about it? Why must it remain a fearful mystery until it happens to strike someone close to us? Jim says it's wrong to keep our eyes shut to it. I think he's right.
Morning, Miss Ewart.
Good morning, Doctor.
What's this?
Oh, that's my little friend again.
It's getting to be quite a habit.
Oh, yes.
You two seem to be getting along fine. Here are the orders for Ann Morton.
A mental hospital needs every facility of medical science for diagnosis of its patients, particularly since, by the nature of their illness, which they do not recognize or understand, they cannot cooperate with the doctor.
Now close your eyes and relax. I'm going to dim the light. Lie perfectly still.
Accurate diagnosis can only come after an exhaustive study of the case. Anne has had a schizophrenic breakdown. Mental illness takes many forms. Some are due to arrested development, others to physical diseases of the brain. Others are reactions to stress or environment, where many factors have contributed over a long period to the illness. In all cases, it is necessary to understand the individual patient and to treat each case as an individual one. And the work must extend beyond the hospital, through the social worker, to the community Anne has come from and will go back to. It is there her illness developed. It is there her health will have to be maintained.
No breakfast tomorrow, Anne. You're starting electric treatment.
Oh, I don't like that.
So you have a headache for an hour after. That's all. Isn't that right, Mrs. Prince?
When you have been very sick and treatment has made you better, you accept it. You don't have to like it. But the fear is gone. The word shock loses its power to make you afraid.
Lunchtime, ladies. Lunchtime, ladies.
Good morning.
Thank you. It's from Anne. California, you know.
Hope she's well and enjoying herself.
You know, I have to make an appointment to have mine done.
Time has a habit of going by, not always unpleasantly, even in a place where you do have to move in lines and always be accounted for and wait for the nurse to let you out and in. And part of the time you can be busy, learning things, doing things that are part of the treatment but don't seem like treatment.
All accounted for. I'll pick them up in time for lunch. Both 11.
Fine. Well, how's it coming along? That looks very good.
Anne was improving, but she wasn't entirely free from her hallucinations yet, and sometimes they led her into difficulties.
Be careful, Anne.
Break something. Break something. Break something.
Oh, Anne, it's all right. Let's go in here, shall we, and try some finger painting? I think you'll like it.
The hospital staff is trained to divert and encourage the patient without making issues of unreasonable acts. Before she is well again, Anne will have had to find again the controls which grew with her from childhood and which were shed in the withering process of her breakdown. For without such controls, no one can live satisfactorily with others. Anne is fortunate to be in a hospital where there is time for the doctor to spend in psychotherapy, the psychological treatment of the individual patient. Such conditions do not always exist in our overcrowded mental hospitals.
Do you know, the price of milk is gone up again. I simply don't know how people manage.
Mornings, the dormitories become treatment wards for electric and insulin therapy. Electroshock treatment causes immediate unconsciousness and a convulsion which quickly subsides. But the patients feel nothing. There is no pain. They sleep after treatment. When they awake, they are groggy, but after a shower, they are ready for breakfast and the day that lies ahead. Anne's dormitory, where her clothes are kept, is where she, too, on other days, has insulin treatment.
Oh, Miss Holmes. Would you go down to the admittance room right away?
Please do.
Insulin produces repeated stimulation of fundamental human needs, like hunger. It is a means of bringing the patient back in touch with the reality she has lost touch with. The change from disintegration to apparent health through treatment is dramatic and sometimes misleading, for it may take months for a personality once frayed out to reknit itself completely, even in the controlled and protected atmosphere of a hospital, where conflict and stress are at a minimum, where privileges and freedoms, with their additional challenges, are given only when the patient is able to handle them and turn them to good account.
Don't they know to your corners all along the left around the hall. All join hands and away to the west. Don't they know to your corners all along the left around the hall.
As you improve, there are occasional days when you can visit at home on trial, and you make cookies in your own kitchen again and bring them back to your friends. And a notable effect you may observe then is that here you have learned how to make friends. But here, being well now so much of the time, there are many things you naturally resent. The sameness and dullness of the food, the lack of privacy, the early rising and going to bed, the clock-like routine, and the boredom which are part of an institutional existence. And above all, living in a locked-up place once you are well enough not to need locks and bars around you.
Oh, well, you girls don't know what it's like. This place is far better than where I was when I was over there in the other building. It was much worse. You'd have to be upset for a long time to go where the chronic patients are. It's very hard to look after them, get them to eat and take care of themselves and not hurt others or be hurt. There are so many untidy people to look after. It never can be kept like our building. I only realized how sick I'd been when I began to notice what was going on around me. I think it helped me to want to get well. It's hard to believe anyone from there gets well, but they do. Some of them have been there for years. Some always will be. And the food, it's way better here.
Here's your sedative.
Thank you.
Hey there. Don't I get a cocktail?
No, you won't need one.
Good night. No, thanks.
Thank you.
With Anne getting better, Mrs. Morton worried herself sick over not being able to have her home where she could look after her. The social worker explained the hospital's position. To rush things might mean a relapse. I looked in on Mrs. Morton when I could, but my medicines weren't what her sickness wanted. It was Anne, and Anne had been gone a long time. I was going to the city anyway, to a medical meeting, and I told Mrs. Morton I'd see Anne and her doctors. Then, too, I felt I owed it to myself to really look at a mental hospital. The social worker has brought something to all of us. I don't know that we've learned anything new, but it's cleared the air for us somehow. Since she's been coming, I think we understand a bit more. And I think Anne's going to notice it when she comes home. I remember not so many years ago when a patient went into a mental hospital, there wasn't much more you could do than wait for him to recover by himself. Now there are treatments which didn't exist before. And the usual question is not can he get better, but when will he get better? The whole atmosphere has changed. Now they look to immediate treatments and rapid recovery. Now they discharge almost as many as they admit. You don't hear much about the cures. People talk about their operations, but not about their mental illnesses. Mental illness isn't respectable yet. Nowadays, too, medical students and nurses and social workers are learning more about mental illness. We're beginning to set up community clinics and psychiatric wards in general hospitals to catch problems before they develop to a point where the mental hospital is the only answer. People don't like to think about mental illness. It's not comfortable. The result is we don't pay the attention to it that it merits as a public health problem. We still spend less to support the mentally ill than we do prisoners in jails. About a third of the mental hospital population is the aged, people whose faculties are no longer equal to living without care and assistance. Our old people could be cared for in other ways if we would provide the facilities, but we usually close our eyes to this problem and to our own old age. I left Anne with some of her fellow patients waiting for their group therapy to begin. If you saw these people anywhere else, you wouldn't know they'd been mentally sick. They knew. The experience had given them a good deal of understanding. Group therapy is a relatively new form of treatment. Free discussion of personal problems in a group with guidance from a doctor. It gives the patients insight into the difficulties that made them sick. It teaches them to see themselves in better perspective, that they are not unique, that others have similar problems. They become less self-centered. They find new satisfaction in doing things for others. Anne looked so well that I wanted to put her in my pocket and take her home with me. But I soon changed my mind. We met a girl whose family had been too eager to get her home before the doctors were sure she was well enough. It might put her back several months. Her mother sent Anne those baggage labels after all. I I didn't think she would. She knew better now, but I guess she told her story too often to go back on it. Anne had to seem to come back from California to bear it out. It was a great joke to Anne's therapy group. Having experienced mental illness, they couldn't understand why people outside think of it as any less respectable than any other illness. The doctor had to point out that since people still do think that way, they'd unfortunately have to expect some disagreeable times.
We will assume that Anne is being interviewed for her first job, and I'm her prospective boss. Now, Miss Martin,
How do you do?
where were you working last?
In an insurance office.
Why'd you leave there?
I got sick.
Sick?
Why, yes.
What was wrong?
Well, I had a nervous breakdown.
Oh?
A
nervous breakdown?
I spent some time in a mental hospital.
You were in a what?
A mental hospital.
A mental hospital?
Well, I don't see why that would.
Well, you see, Anne's disturbed. What do you think about that?
That's not fair. She should have a test.
I don't think Anne or anyone else
She
should
needs a mental hospital. There's no reason to prevent her from getting a job. She needs a job.
The things people will do.
The doctor who brought Anne to this hospital is assistant clinical director now. There was a pretty important decision affecting Anne at staff conference today. She's completely recovered. It doesn't matter where you've been when you've been away for a long time. It's still home you're coming back to, and it's still you who's returning. And friends who are friends won't care about anything except that you're back. Everything's okay, Doc. Everything's okay. I hope it is for Anne.